comes from Chihuahua. She's Mexica, Toromara. And she came from a smaller family, not as big as my dad. She's the oldest of 14. Now, it's not like we do family planning. We just plan big, right? My grandma said that every kid's a blessing. We had a lot of blessings, you know. But we ended up, after all the travel back and forth, even though I was born in those areas, I ended up being raised in Compton. So I'm straight out of Compton, right? I grew up in a barrio, neighborhood, black-brown neighborhood, and I guess they would consider it high risk, delinquent, impoverished. But in that neighborhood that I grew up in, that I didn't know we were poor, because my mama never said we're poor. She used just to say, eat those beans, right? And I would complain, why do we got to eat beans again, Mom? Why can't you make something else? Be quiet, just eat the beans. But why can't you make something else? It's always beans. Why don't you? You ought to be glad you have beans. People in other countries don't have nothing, but why? Kneel down. Why? Ask for forgiveness. I'm sorry, God, for complaining about beans. You know, my mom's crossed over a number of years ago, and I miss my mama's beans. Didn't realize that when she was making those beans, and she got those beans, and she had to sit with her and take out the little rocks of those beans, and she said, you got to pray. You got to pray when you take out those beans, because that's part of what you got to do in your life. You got to take out those parts that are not going to feed you. She'd get those beans and put them in the water and put the onion and the garlic and all of that, and she'd say a little prayer. Didn't realize that was a recipe that her mama gave her, that her mama gave her, that her mama gave her. Didn't realize in that little bowl of beans that she gave me were generations of medicine. But what happens sometimes when you live in this world, you don't appreciate those things. You don't recognize in those traditions, those ways. And I lived in Compton, a crazy neighborhood, a lot of things going on. I guess you consider a lot of risk factors, My house, a lot of kids, always a baby crying, all the time. I would trip when the teacher says, go home and find a quiet place to study. I'm like, where? If you're really motivated, you'll find, like, where? If you really want to do well in school, like, where? And I guess that's why my daddy talked loud. I had a loud talking dad. Hey, me, come back, get over here. What's your name? Come here. What are you doing? My friends come, is your dad mad? I said, no, dude's the way he talks all the time. Kind of trip if a social worker would have come to my house. You better send him to anger management. It's developmentally inappropriate for these kids. No. That's when my dad was fine, when he talked loud. Especially talked loud when he saw relatives come over. When people came to him that saw him, embraced him and honored him. I also saw what happened to my dad when he was in places where people did not honor him. And as a little boy, it confused me because we were taught to honor everyone. I was taught by my grandma. In that house, I lived with grandmas. My mom's mom and my dad's mom, not both at the same time. You don't put two grandmas together. I don't care how holy they are. No. They got their ways, and, they want you to be their favorite, and, But my little grandma, my mama's mama, she was about that tall, and I thought she was kind of crazy because she did strange things to me. One of the strange things she did, she'd get up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. To me, that's crazy. Grandma, why don't you sleep later? You don't got to go to school. You got to go to work. Why don't you sleep? No, she would get up at 4 o'clock, and I didn't understand. She'd go out and talk to her plants. Good morning, how you doing? One of the other. And then she would give them water. I'm going to feed you water. Please, I'm going to take a little bit of you. She would talk to these plants, ask for permission. She says, I need to take a little bit of you because my grandson is sick. Will you help me heal him? I thought my grandma was crazy. Why do you talk to plants? Why do you ask for permission? Just take it. And then she'd take it and make this yucky tea and give it to us and it'd make us better. I didn't understand. I thought my grandma was crazy. She got up at 4 in the morning, didn't understand at that time that that's a sacred time. That at 4 in the morning is when grandmother moon and grandfather sun comes together. They sing that song together, their rhythm, their vibration is together. That's where creation happens again. That's where regardless of what happened the day before, we have another day. So my grandma would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and she'd go in that crowded house where all of us lived. And there's a little hole in the wall. In that little hole in the wall, my grandma had her sacreds, had her candles. And she had all kinds of things from her sacred natives to her Catholic. She put them all there. She used anything that would get her closer to that sacred. There's a little pillow on the ground, and she'd kneel down right there in that pillow. And you could almost tell how many problems we had, because the more problems we had, the longer she'd stay right there. But after she finished, praying, sometimes an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, she'd come to the room where all of us kids were sleeping. And my grandma would bless us up. She would bless us all up. And I used to hate it sometimes. 5:30 in the morning, Grandma, why are you waking me so early? I was having a good dream. You messed up my dream, Grandma. I said, be quiet. Why? You blessed me last night before I went to sleep. Isn't it still good for now? And you're going to bless me when I go to school. Why I got all these blessings? What, I got the devil in me or what? I didn't understand. I didn't understand the significance of blessing. I didn't understand the significance of someone that was connected to the sacred saying to you every day, you're a blessing. You're a blessing. You're a blessing. You're a blessing. My grandma would bless up the kids that were good in school, the ones that weren't good in school, the skinny kids, the fat kids, the stinky kids. She didn't care. She'd bless us all up. And I didn't understand why my grandma needed to inoculate me with the spirit of our ancestors, with the message of great, great ancestors that says that Creator doesn't make junk. Creator only makes blessings. And so she would inoculate me and bless me up before I left. My grandma knew something that I didn't know. She knew that I would go in a world that was not going to see me as a blessing. That many times, just because of the color of my skin or how I was dressed or my hair or how I looked, they already had a plan to lock me up or deport me or put me out or take me out. That when I went in classrooms, they're already going to put me in the back of the room and expel me and suspend me. My grandma knew that this world was wounded and didn't appreciate what we call in my language, Incloque Nahuake, which means interconnected sacredness. My grandma knew that just with the look of people, I could feel their energy. So she blessed me up. And she blessed me every day and as many times as she could. And so I want to take a moment here because we got a lot of work to do. But we can't do the work unless we're grounded. We can do the work, but it may not be sacred work. It may be angry work. And it may be work that divides us and doesn't bring us in that Incloque Nahuake. We have to be grounded. So I want to just take a moment. And I want to invite your ancestors in the room. I can't imagine what my great-great-grandmothers, great-great-grandfathers did. What they had to go through, what they had to deal with, what they had to put up with, and they did give up. And your ancestors did the same thing. All of your ancestors struggled, they had difficulty, and they didn't give up. But like your grandmother, my grandmother, they all had a dream. And I'm a grandfather now. My dream for my grandkids is they're going to have a better world. They're going to have more blessings and less pain and less struggle. So inviting your ancestors in the room, and maybe you didn't have a grandma like my grandma. Maybe you didn't even know your grandma. Maybe your grandma or grandpa were wounded. They were so wounded they could barely just survive and just live another day, where they didn't have the energy to reach back to those traditions and pull them out. Or maybe they were so ashamed of who they were that they left those traditions behind, and so they didn't give you that blessing tradition. And maybe your grandparents were separated from you because of racism and discrimination and deportation, all of those things. So you didn't even know them. Maybe you never got the blessing. So I want to stop for a moment. And I want to say to you on behalf of your ancestors, on behalf of your great-grandmothers, on behalf of your great-grandfathers, that you are a blessing just the way you are. As you sit there today, you don't have to know anymore. You got to lose weight. You got to color your hair. You got to do none of those things. The sacredness lies within all of us. And my grandma would show that in her food. She would cook, and I lived in Compton, so I had friends. My best friend was Tyrone Mosley, and he would come over usually right around when my grandma was cooking. He said, Jerry, you want to play? Oh, I know why you want to play right now, because my grandma's going to cook, huh? No, I just want to play. And then my grandma would come over, pues, ¿quién quiere comer? Tyrone raised his hand like that. I don't know where he learned Spanish from. He said, pues pásale, mijo. And he walked in. Where did he learn Spanish? No ESL classes. And she called him mijo, which means my son. My grandma called the same thing the time when she called to me, because in our traditional way, all the children are your children. In my family, we were all related. In second grade, they told me to draw my family. I'd grow 6 grandmothers. How do you have 6 grandmothers? I don't know. I just call them Nana. They said all the great people are my grandparents. Anybody my parents' age, my uncle and aunt, anybody my age was my cousin. And that was cool, except I have a fine cousin named Monica at 13. I wish she wasn't my cousin, but she was my cousin. And the thing is, when people are related to you, you treat them different. My daughter goes to a school, my granddaughter goes to school in Hawaii, our native Hawaiian relatives. And they start the day where the elder comes and brings them in a circle all together and sings a chant and brings all their spirit together. And my granddaughters call their teachers auntie. Those traditions of us being related. So my grandmother would take Tyrone and sit us together and bless him up too. Blessed him in that way too. And as in every family, there are kids that, sometimes cooperate and some that don't, some that cry a lot, and I had the responsibility you take care of your nephew. And one of my nephews, Ronnie was a crybaby. I don't know if you had crybaby. You might have been the crybaby. I don't know, but he cried for everything. And I was supposed to be watching him. He's in his crib. I could hear him. And my grandma says, well, ¿qué tiene? What's wrong with Ronnie? Nothing. It's just Ronnie. Oh, well, go see. Grandma, it's just Ronnie. It's nothing. And how many times do we play off when people are hurting? Do we just want to diagnose them and medicate them? We work with a lot of kids that get expelled and suspended because they're acting out their pain. A lot of what we're seeing today is children younger and younger with more anxiety, more depression, suicidal. Elementary school kids. The work we do, who's healing the children? And so my grandma gets mad at me because
all right, Ramon, you want to unmute?
Well, I want to cut that off. There's just a few more minutes, but I wanted to introduce you to El Maestro. In Spanish, we call a teacher El Maestro, Maestro Jerry Teo, who has done a lot of work with kids and families. Now, what he's done is, for those who don't know, in 1519 through 1521, there was a conquest. And in that conquest, a lot of the material that had been developed was buried and destroyed. And so what happened is when the Spanish priests came into that part of Mexico, which would have been right around Mexico City where the conquest took place, they began to write manuscripts in Spanish. They're called the codices. So what Jerry has done is he has studied one of the codices And in that codex, they talk about how children were raised and born in Aztec society. And so what he's doing with his work is he's taking children back to their roots and helping them understand who they are, because so much of them has been taken away in American society through the racism and this discrimination that's taking place. And so what Jerry is challenging educators to do is to take those children and help them reclaim their roots. Because when you take a flower out of its root, that flower is going to die. And so he started that work some time back and has become a maestro, a national maestro, to share his work with others, and has also trained several healers that are dispersed throughout the Southwest. One of them from Denver is now with him as a master maestro, as a full-time teacher. I'm going to see if I can get a couple of them slides. If I can't, for whatever reason, then we'll just continue talking, and then we'll open it up. I'm going to go with this. Can that be seen? Can folks see that?
Yes, we can see this. We can see it, Ramon.
Okay. I'm going to show just a couple, because although this isn't the one that I wanted, La cultura cura, or the culture cures, or cultural-based healing, is a method for healing and healthy development, which is inextricably tied and linked to restoring one's true cultural identity as the foundation of well-being for individuals, families, and societies. It employs a multi-generational process of learning and or remembering one's true and positive cultural principles, customs, and traditions. And this is accomplished through one, cultural rooted and responsive programming; two, provider network and capacity building; and three, transformation of systems from trauma to healing informed efforts. So what does that have to do with today? Well, right now, in all of the public schools and in society in general, they're employing mental health programs because of the pandemic and what's going on with human beings right now, having been secluded, isolated, taken from their significant others, from their traditional interaction patterns. And there's a lot of neurosis that's being developed out of that. But we're doing is what he does, is what he takes folks back to deal with what is called historical and intergenerational trauma. And that is, in cultures where their stories are told, children may not have experienced that particular situation or incident. That would be considered secondary trauma, but they've been told a story and it stays with them. And that's what intergenerational trauma really is. So he works with boys and men. Why boys and men? That's because a big percentage of our men are in prisons, and they're growing by leaps and bounds. When I worked in mental health, I used to go to the prisons and do evaluations for men that were coming out back into the community. And the one in Canyon City prison was filled with Black and mostly brown men and young boys, really 18, 19 years old. So acknowledge within the boys and men of color field for Latino and Native males, the path to healing and healthy development, again, is linked to the culture. So I'm going to stop there because I wanted to give you that point of view as a basis for understanding why I would show this to a group of folks dealing with safety, criminal justice, the law, assistance programs, and so forth, so that we could have a dialogue about what our children are going through and what we as adults ought to be doing with children, both in systems, schools, criminal justice, health and human services, and some of the positive stuff that's happened. Because what we're doing is we're linking those children to their ancestors. Every day I pray that my ancestors, including my mom who's gone, come down and they be with me. I prayed before I came here so that he would give me the strength, my ancestors, and the power to be able to communicate with you and make sense about something that you may not be familiar with. You all have ancestors. We all have culture, and many cultures have been destroyed. And we're reclaiming those cultures and those traditions that our grandparents gave us so that we become healthier human beings. Because his message, Jerry's message, is that each and every one of you and each and every one in your families are sacred. And he asks the question, when did you lose your sacredness? When did that happen? In the Chicano psychology model that he uses, they don't use all these fancy diagnostics, compulsive disorder, neurosis, and just histrionic personality disorder, obsessive compulsive. They don't use those terms. They ask the child, what happened to you? Please tell us your story, so that they can learn from that child what that child is feeling. They don't automatically put diagnostics. I've been called in some cases here recently where one kid is ready and he got 11 to 25 years in a federal penitentiary. No violence was involved. There could have been, but there wasn't. And that's what's happening. So with that, I'm going to open it up and I want you to feel. I want you to feel what you saw in there and move from your intelligence, which can be a defense mechanism, to your heart and your soul and say, what am I feeling right now about what I just saw? Or ask questions about what things in there meant, what Jerry was talking about, so that when you leave here and we get together next week for the last piece, that you would have had some sensitivity about what's really happening to our children. In this case, I mean brown and black children and natives that Jerry Teo and other healers are working with many in this community. Okay? So question, comment, criticism, it's an open field. And everything you say will be sacred and it'll be respected, and we'll talk about it. Okay?
So Ramon, keeping tradition alive, we talk about a lot of this, our tradition and the healing and information comes from our ancestors and these stories that are passed down from generation to generation. That's how we keep it alive. There was a situation I was in years back, and Teresa could relate to this because, we served on National Fire Service boards, and we spent a lot of time with our own culture. And I was in South Beach with a bunch of firefighters from all over the country, the National Association of Hispanic Firefighters. And we were sitting in the condo of Chief Mario Trevino's living room, his living room in his condo there in South Beach. And we're all from different parts of the country, and we're talking about La Llorona. And everybody knew about these stories, these stories that our parents taught us. And we were joking because I was like, no, I'm pretty sure the Llorona is from Colorado. And and they're like, no, she's in Texas, and it was just funny because you take these stories that were taught to us from our mothers, and her mother and their mother, going way back, and it's the same story, but it's tailored specifically for us. and so it was just really funny, but it gave me such an appreciation for the culture and that there are still traditions and stories that are still passed down from one generation to the other, and as a point to keep us good and keep us making good decisions and doing the right thing, right? And so it reminded me of that, just thinking of my mom and all those stories, and it's important to pass down those stories.
Well, let me and sometimes there are things that change tradition. Let me give you a feminist point of view. And I'm a male. That La Llorona, sometimes the women have said, why did they pick a woman throughout history to be the bad person? Think about that. But what
You
happened,
mean,
like,
do you mean the story's not true?
well,
Yeah.
that's the question. But La Llorona in mythology comes from Hernando Cortés. He met, remember the woman Malintzin, or Marina was her name. Later on, she becomes La Malinche. And La Malinche in Spanish is a negative connotation. And she's been accused of selling out the Native Americans at that time in history to the Spaniards. But what happened, but in mythology, what they've done, the women have researched it and said that Marina, she was sold as a slave to Cortés, and they had the first mestizo. A mestiza is a mixture of, at that time, the Spaniard and the indigenous, the Indian, and that Cortés, because he was a military person, and that's how he operated. He wanted to take the male children, and he wanted to take them to Spain. And the woman said, no, you can't do that, because in our culture, you have to be buried in the place where you were born. And so she paradoxically drowns them to heal them for the spiritual life. That's part of the mythology of La Llorona. Because I have a story from Kansas, and I'm from Wichita, and yes, there are Chicanos there, about La Llorona that scared me. Whenever my mom didn't want us to go outside, she was, andale, go outside, go ahead, but be careful, because La Llorona might be out there. And do you think we were going to go out there? I don't think so. So we have to kind of keep it in context and build upon it. But certainly what the women are saying is we need to revisit it and ask the question, why was a woman picked? But that story comes from mythology, from Aztec mythology. So thank you for sharing that. But I don't want to scare you today. We'll wait till Halloween, and then we'll talk about La Llorona and the leyendas, the legends that we do in our culture. Because I've been to Mexico during Dia de los Muertos in a cemetery where we were from America. We were studying there for 2 weeks, and we came to the front of the church, and they let us in as guests in front of 4,000 people. We went to the inside of the cemetery, and they began to tell the leyendas, and I was frozen. I didn't want to leave. I thought, oh man, am I going to be all right? But it was interesting and full of culture and richness. So next comment, but thank you for sharing that, Berta. And I hope, think about my comments, because as I tell my students, if you came here looking for the truth, you better leave, because I don't know the truth. I'm a researcher. I know statistics. I read all the time. But do I know the truth? I don't know that I know the truth. I look for it every day in my life. And that's what you need to do. When you come to my class, walk out with more questions and answers, because then it'll always keep your mind thinking and moving and advancing itself. Okay, next. I hope I didn't scare you, or Alberta, I hope Alberta didn't scare you. So I'm blaming the woman against you.
Well, I just want to share, this is Teresa, and I just want to share that I could truly relate to that video. That video took me right back to my roots, to my family. When he said 14 kids, I'm like, oh, he's talking my language, because I was number 14 of 16 kids. So my family grew up with, as I was off screen because I was crying and laughing at the same time, because that truly, I'm like, was he in my household? Was he there when, and came from a very background where, my mother did pray over her children. There were times that's all she had to offer us was her prayers, and she believed in us. She instilled in me that I could be whatever I desired to be. And I left her home knowing that I was special, or, even if I weren't, I believed it, because that's that's what I was told.
Mhm.
And that's,
Mhm.
and I came into the world and I left her home feeling that way. And did the world give me some knocks and bruises? Yes, it did. But the one thing is that I didn't quit, and we were taught not to quit. So yes, that video was really resonating with me, and thank you for sharing it, because I really felt like it. You know, he just grew up in my household, and that's where, straight from the South. And beans, and mine was also rice. We had a little bit of rice with our beans too. But that was a wonderful, wonderful video. So thank you for sharing it.
There was Jerry speaks in a lot of symbolism, and he
Yes.
was really talking about the gifts that sometimes we forget, the small little gifts that mean so much to us, that help us make it through the day. But think about trauma, and think about what trauma is. By definition, trauma is a delayed reaction to a traumatic event. You're in a place and time where you can't do anything, so you bury it. And you know, Freud, and I'm not a Freudian psychologist, Freud says that we never forget anything, that we choose not to remember because it's very painful, the things that we carry. But then what happens is a trigger mechanism goes off and sets that memory, and it comes to our consciousness, and we experience post-traumatic stress disorder, or as the Africans call it, post-traumatic slave syndrome, because of the slavery that the African Americans went through, the trauma. And I'm going to take a risk here and share what happened to me. And it's painful, but I went to a Jesuit high school, and was I mess up? Like Jerry said, yeah, occasionally. Well, a bunch of us were in the class before the teacher came in. He was a Jesuit priest, and we were throwing spit wads at each other. And he caught me as I threw one. And he called me outside. And he gave me a tongue thrashing. And he told me to take my glasses off, and he slapped me. And he said, "You're nothing but a punk." And he just humiliated and degraded me. Well, what do? You cry. And he said, "You don't go back in my classroom. You're supposed to be this tough punk. So when you stop, you come back in." And I buried that. Huh? And then what happened? They had the 40-year reunion, and I got a call to read poetry. I'm a published poet, to read poetry at the 40-year reunion. And I thought about it for a long time. And there's more to the story than that, but I decided to go. So I called the guy who called me, and he said, "Call this other young man." I can't remember his name. And I was talking to him on the phone. He goes, "My last name's Del Castillo." I had 3 other brothers. They called all of us Del because they thought Del was our first name. And I said, "Yeah, we got 3 brothers that are named Del." I said, "Del Castillo is my last name." And anyway, he goes, "I have something I want to share with you." And I said, "What is it?" He goes, "I saw Father Gleason slap you." I go, "How could you have?" He goes, "I was coming out of the bathroom." And I go, "And?" He goes, "It scared me. I was so scared in that classroom." Well, I had forgotten about it, and he brought it up. And so I went to see it. My brother's a psychodramatist. And I told him, and he said, you want to go through some healing?" So we did some work. That's how deep it is. And don't think that our children, and even yourselves, carry the wounds that Jerry's talking about, because you do. And what we're saying right now, as we talk about mental health in the city and county of Denver, that our children aren't going through it, and that they're going to go through more of it, particularly now that they passed Senate Bill 1911-92, that's going to introduce ethnic studies into the curriculum from K through 12. And don't tell me that children who've never been told their stories and the greatness and the richness of the culture and traditions aren't going to say, "How come they kept that from me? Why would they do that to me?" And that's not going to be traumatic for these kids. And I'm telling the teachers that I'm working with the district curriculum team saying, be prepared to help these children deal with that trauma that they've carried all their lives. How do I know? Because that happened to me. I treated Vietnam veterans when I wrote my first master's on post-traumatic stress disorder, and I saw PTSD in its worst form. My God, it was horrendous to watch these men. At that time, I had no women in the group. There were women in Vietnam, men, and what they went through and what they continue to carry. Then multiply it through Afghanistan, Persia, the Gulf War, and what we carry in our hearts and in our souls that needs to be healed. And women that were abused. This is going to open up the Pandora's box, but that's okay. So I tell the teachers, develop healing circles and allow these children to go in that healing circle and have them process why it is that they're carrying this pain and this wound. Now, if that's too deep, tell me and I'll stop. But I took a risk by sharing that because this is the kind of work that we do with kids and with families. I mean, I've done that work since with the curandera. I did it since 76, but in 1980, I learned a lot of stuff from her on how to do things. So anybody else?
Well, Ramon, thanks for sharing that. Yan Ting had a question.
Okay.
Yan Ting?
Yeah, I was just wondering, is education important in Hispanic culture? And what are the possible barriers for Hispanics in the US for the educational opportunities?
Let's start with one and kind of delve on that. And that's that two things, they're inextricably tied to each other. That's history and identity. Because what the system did to the Chicano, to the Mexican American, is they took away their identity. It happened twice in the 15th century, and then it happened after the Mexican-American War when the Southwest was annexed to this country. They took away the identity. And that's why right now we're still struggling. Hispanic, Chicano, Mexican-American, Mestizo. What are we? That we can trace it back to the 15th century, and then again in 1848 after the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So identity and teaching them their history, the beautiful parts of their history, and that they in fact have contributed to what this country is. People were not successful on their own. People in American, in every single society, had to depend on the workforce to create anything. So all those working class families have never been given that respect that they deserve in the world that we live in. And that's going to be the healing part of it. It's going to help them realize, tell me the story about who I am so that I can know and I won't be confused. That's at least two parts that we hope that the curriculum does. Because as you read it, it says that the history, culture, and contributions of the four major ethnic groups, and incidentally, the Asians were just added. We worked with the legislature, and their stories will be told. So that I'm right now on a reading. I've been reading all summer. This book is called Murder Incorporated. That talks about all the major ethnic groups, what they've gone through. I've read at least a dozen books this summer just to empower myself to be ready to help the teachers develop the curriculum to share them stories. Not in a bad way, but in a way to say, guess what? Guess what they gave us that we didn't have in this society? And that goes for all the cultures. And it'll include the women. When I opened up my presentation last week about Dolores Huerta, I did that for the obvious reason. She's a heroine who's been kept out of history. And now we're saying, no more. Right now, the Richard Castro Distinguished Visiting Professorship, his wife was an equally valid activist in the 1960s, 70s movement. Guess what? That is now the Richard T. and Virginia Castro Distinguished Visiting Professorship. That's what we have to do. Give honor and respect to those groups and people that helped build this country. And it's got to be positive, but there's going to be the tough times. They tried it once before. And what happened is I was working for the district. I was doing a lot of different kind of work. And a teacher she was very progressive, was teaching multicultural literature. And she used Corky Gonzalez's book, I Am Joaquin, Lost in the World of Confusion, Scorned by Attitude, Suppressed by Manipulation. And he tells the history of the Chicano. And when she read that, the white kids and the brown kids started arguing with each other. Well, I had told her not to do that unless she thought she was prepared. Well, she said she was. And she called me crying. I said, what's wrong? She goes, all hell broke loose in my classroom. I said, well, let me go in there. So the next class, about a couple of days later, I went with her and we talked about it. So when I talked to you about how it opens Pandora's box, the trauma, I know from experience because I helped that woman get that class stable again and understanding that we have to go through pain in order to heal. And sometimes the pain isn't pleasant. The wounds are still there and they still hurt. And we have to work past that and say, look at the outcome. Look where we're at now. Because you can't change the past, but you can create a better tomorrow. That's my philosophy. But you have to understand it. And so you take people back. So next.
Do you have another question,
Mario.
Roberta? If you don't, I have a couple of them.
Mario,
No, I don't. I was just
Okay.
like, wow.
Okay,
I don't know, just wow.
Yeah, then I have a couple of questions.
well,
Okay,
I think Mario, did you have your hand up?
I just have a comment, but if
that
she can go
okay?
ahead of me, that's fine.
no, I've talked already. You go right ahead. I'll wait.
Sure. I just want to share. So I'm Mexicano. My family, I'm second generation. But I just want to talk about a couple of things that I think are still happening to minorities and women. And so I have a daughter. One of my daughters is 10 years old. So at school, they were doing a little field trip where they were going to pretend to run a city. And so my daughter got given the option to be a cashier, a bus driver, and like a salesperson. So my daughter has the highest grade in the class. She is awesome. She's super smart. So she came home and said, we're going to do a pretend city and I'm going to be a cashier. And I said, that's great. Sounds good. How'd you come to kind of do the cashier job? And she says, well, the teacher gave me some choices. And I said, oh, well, what are the choices? And she mentioned those three choices. So women, this is where I think it plays in a little bit. And so, and the teacher's a woman, but I said, what were all the choices? She goes, well, you could be mayor, police officer, firefighter, business owner, and all these gamut of jobs. And working in government my entire life, I just know there's a ton of opportunities for women and minorities if, most of the time if you work hard. And so I said, well, I just had so many questions like, Mr. Del Castillo mentioned, like how my daughter came to do this. So I let her do it. I stayed engaged in it. But so I asked her, I said, where do you sit in the class? And she goes, I sit in the back. And I said, you like it there? And she goes, yeah. I said, who? So I just got curious about her classroom. So just to kind of make a long story short, since we're running out of time, is I engaged a teacher and I said, hey, I just have a couple questions about this fake city you guys created and how my daughter came to get these choices and why she sits at the back of the class. And you think I just deer in the headlights looked because I confronted her and I said, my daughter has the best grade in the class based on what you told us at the last discussion. She's super engaged, but you only gave her 3 job options and they were all meant to hold her down. So I don't want you doing that anymore. I want you to allow her the same opportunity as every other kid in this classroom. And if she wants to be mayor, I want you to encourage her, not discourage. So she can be a mayor, she can be a senator, she can be a lawyer, she can be an astronaut. She's Hispanic Latina. So, I mean, she's a Latina woman. And so I said, in my house, women can do anything. So I want you as her teacher in 5th grade to push her to be whatever she wants to be. And I don't mind you recommending being a cashier. My niece is a cashier for 30 years, has a full pension. There's great benefits. But I don't want you holding her down anymore. And she took it well. But you have to look what's going on. You have to make sure you get engaged, because I don't think people fully understand. I was a firefighter for 31 years. Mario Trevino, I've met him, Seattle, right? I still am, Hispanic firefighters.
Are you really? Oh, wow. I was on their
Yeah.
board. Nice.
Oh, yeah, were you? And so,
Yeah, we'll have to talk. Let's talk.
yeah, we'll have to talk offline. So I just was thrown by that because, it's a great opportunity. But I think it's also a little bit on us to share our culture with our friends. Like when we have friends over, whatever their race is, and we have all kinds of friends, we'll sometimes make Mexican food that they've not eaten on purpose. And we tell them, hey, help it, just want biscochitos, carne adobada, chips and salsa with the rest of them with sopapillas, and they're always like, we want you to be the host. I'm like, I can't be the host all the time, guys.
Yeah.
So we share our culture because they don't know. And I take it upon ourselves to let them know what our culture is about. Everybody loves their family. So the Mexicanos or Latinos aren't the only ones that love their family. I know that. So we'll share families of my youth, youngest of 14, grandma like they talked about, abuelita just like they talked about. That was my grandma. So I share those stories, and they're so excited to absorb it. And so I always say when they have friends over, I find a way to inject my culture into my party. And we're having vino and margaritas, and without that stuff that gives you heartburn, you know what I mean? And I know this is recorded, so that's all I'll say about that.
Let me
But we
comment.
share our culture with our friends.
Let me comment, Mario. Your daughter went through what the psychologists call a microaggression. Dr. Daryl Sue talks about microaggressions. Let me read the definition. Brief and commonplace verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial, gender, sex-oriented, and religious slights to the targeted person or group that produce stress and affect the emotional well-being of individuals and groups. And let me tell you the antidote. Your parenting. Your parenting and what you went to that teacher and said showed your daughter that she was still sacred. Many times we didn't have that. The parents wouldn't dare, my mom wouldn't dare go talk to a priest about what had happened. I never told my mom that story. So brother, that's a good story. You should write that story, and it should be in a book so that people can say, what do they mean? Go ahead, Teresa, and then we'll have to close down because it's close to 12.
Yes, we have like a minute left in case anybody wants to hang on. But I just wanted to let you know what the time is. There is a question on the floor, just quickly. What books have influenced your learning recently, Ramon?
Okay.
From one of our book nerds out there. I won't mention any names, Yanting. I have to say that. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm trying to, well, this book here, Murder Incorporated, certainly is the book I'm reading now. Isabel Wilkerson on caste, and Ibram Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, or I last 3 of the books. And then my healing parts, I'm one of the authors of this book. I have a chapter in La Cultura Viene y Estar, Mesoamerican-based healing and mental health practice and evidence. And then I actually edited this book with 4 Native American psychologists, and I have a chapter in there. So that's the kind of reading I do. And is history and sociology, but the healing mental health piece of it is really my emphasis about how do we work with different people, different groups, okay? Well, let me just say one last thing. The antidote that brother maestro Jerry Teo does is called El Hombre Noble, the noble man. And I had that on that slide show I couldn't get up. But what it talks about are the 7 principles of what we're teaching our youth. We're getting rid of that false machismo. That's for sure. But we're talking about the noble man and how the noble man behaved with his kids and family in Aztec society. Those are the teachings we're giving them. And we, in the groups, we go back and forth with guys that come in, you know what I'm saying, in the patriarchal society that we live in, and what they scoop up and internalize and all that. We deal with that in the groups and ask them to be noble men. That's the goal, is their children, but they're going to be hombres nobles. So thank you very much for sharing. And I shall see you in 1 week to talk about critical race theory, which is part academic, but part discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ramon. Thanks everyone for joining us. And we hope that you will be here next week when Dr. Del Castillo presents one last time in this series. It's really so great to have you here with us and to impart your wisdom. And we look forward to it next week.
Okay.
So, thank you, everyone.